The song we have just heard is called Ani Ma'amin, which means I believe. I believe that even though I can't imagine anything worse than what is happening right now, a better life for us is on the way. We don't know when this new day will dawn, like a sunny day after a week of cloudy weather. We don't even know if we will still be alive to welcome it. In the meantime, we do all that we can to make a better world for ourselves, for our children, and if not for our children, then those of all future generations yet to follow. Hello, Shalom. I'm Rabbi Andy Bossov, and I'm here today to share with you this video observance of Yom HaSho'ah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. The song Ani Ma'amin was sung by a particular group of people even when they knew that they were about to die. These were the Jewish people of Europe in the mid-1900s, as they were forced by Nazi soldiers into big rooms that were then filled with poisonous gas. Many others were simply shot to death in big groups, or whenever they did something that the Nazis didn't like. Millions more, millions, were starved and abused and forced to work even though they were hungry and sick. Otherwise, they would be killed. This period of time, from the late 1930s until 1945, was known as the Holocaust. The word Holocaust means completely burned or destroyed. At the same time the Holocaust was happening, many countries fought against the Nazis because they said they wanted to take over the whole world. That's why World War II was fought, which put an end to the Nazis and ended the Holocaust as well. With this video presentation, we observe the Jewish calendar's Holocaust Remembrance Day, known in Hebrew as Yom HaSho'ah. We force ourselves to remember how terrible it was when one group of people not only thought that they were better than all other human beings, but they made it their business to actually kill everyone they didn't want to be alive in the world. None of us should ever forget what happened then and help make sure it never happens again. A significant part of the Nazi plan was to get rid of all the Jews on earth, starting with the continent of Europe. While the United States, many European countries, and other allies were fighting to stop the Nazis from carrying out this evil plot, many, many different people died as well. Thousands and thousands of military fighters from all over the world died. Millions of Christians of all denominations lost their lives. And there were other specific groups that the Nazis didn't like. Gypsies, the elderly, people who had severe mental or physical health problems, people who were homosexual, and many others. People in many places of the world were involved in war and were scared each and every day for more than 5 years while all of this was happening. People fought back and resisted the Nazi plan in many different ways. One little group that did so were the Jewish people who lived in the capital city of Poland, Warsaw. The Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto smuggled guns and other weapons into their tiny, overcrowded little section of town and started an uprising against the Nazis. The anniversary of the start of this fighting is now the same day that we observe Yom HaSho'ah every year. Although the uprising of the Warsaw Jewish ghetto was eventually defeated by the Nazis, we still remember the fighting spirit of all who died during the Holocaust. All of those people who died in the name of freedom and justice and the right to live of all human beings. On a day like this, we purposely remember the things that were important to the people who died fighting or were murdered. One thing that unified many Jews of Europe was the use of the language called Yiddish. Some people also call it Jewish. Some songs in this program are sung in Yiddish, which is a mixture of Hebrew with German and Polish and Russian. The next song is called Rozenkas mit Mantlin, Raisins and Almonds, a sweet song which sounds like a lullaby, but it's kind of a lullaby for the whole Jewish people.
In dem Beis HaMikdash, in a Winkel cheder, siehst die Almona Bas Zion allein. Ihr ben Yochel Yile Wigzike Seder, und singt ihm zum Schlafen a Liedele schön. Steht a Chlor weiß Ziegele, das Ziegele ist geworden handeln, mit Rozenkas und Mandeln, das wird sein den Beruf.
A big question that people have about the Holocaust is why? Why did this happen? Why did the Nazis hate the Jewish people so much? How could they be allowed to do this to them? Didn't people know what was going on? Well, that's about 4 questions in one, isn't it? People fighting with each other was nothing new to the 20th century, the 1900s. Wars between neighboring groups of people have been fought, it is believed, since Cain first killed his brother Abel in one of the very first chapters of the Bible. And let's not forget that the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh, was incorporated into the Christian Bible, the New Testament, and both were included into the Muslim Bible, the Quran. That means millions, even billions of people accept that killing was unfortunately around since the very first people lived on Earth. Like other people too, the Jews have had their enemies through the centuries, and many wars were fought that had absolutely nothing to do with Jews. Remember, Jews lived mainly only in Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa until, let's say, the 1700s. But since Christianity and Judaism finally split apart around the 200s, the specific dislike of the Jewish people was called anti-Semitism, based on how it says in the Bible that one of Noah's sons, who survived the flood, Shem, was an ancestor of the Jewish people. Many Christians don't like Jews simply because they don't want to become Christians like them. Anti-Semitism grew to monstrous sizes in certain places for hundreds of years. Anti-Semitism got really, really bad in the 1800s because there was a big effort to separate people throughout the world into their original countries. A mixed country like the United States would never try to do this because Americans came from a whole bunch of different places. But in Europe, especially, separating different peoples could be done. But it meant that a lot of people would be forced into moving from wherever they lived now and go back to where their ancestors came from many years before. This could have happened for the Jewish people too, except they didn't have a homeland to go back to. They had been kicked out of their home country of Israel more than 1,500 years ago. So what were the Jewish people to do? They didn't have anywhere to go. Instead, they just kept hoping that things would somehow get better. And nobody else wanted them to stay in their country because they had different religious beliefs, different ways to pray and study the Bible, different ways to eat, and so forth. This next song is called In My Own Lifetime, from an old Broadway musical called The Rothschilds, who were a prominent Jewish family in Europe well before World War II, and who hoped that they would have a good future. In My Own Lifetime.
In my own lifetime, I want to see the fighting cease. In my own lifetime, I want to see my sons enjoy the fruits of peace. While I'm still here, I want to know, beyond a doubt, that no one can lock us in or lock us out. We have climbed higher, much higher than I thought we'd climb. It's a long journey, and even though the end's in sight, there's not much time. I want to know we haven't built on sand in my own lifetime.
Jews were never too popular was because their Bible and their laws that came after the Bible taught something differently than the Christian and Muslim Bibles. What was this big difference? It had to do with whether or not people somehow lived on after they died. It didn't seem to matter that many Jews came to accept the idea of life after death, that the soul would somehow continue to live even after a person's body died. And one day when the Messiah comes, or according to Christianity, when the Messiah comes back, there will be no more suffering or evil on earth, that perhaps there would be no more death even. But not all Jews believed this, and it wasn't talked about in the Jewish Bible. So, whether a Jewish person believed in an afterlife or not, they all believed that they had to do their best to help make life better right now for everyone on earth. No waiting for eternal happiness in heaven, Let's try to make heaven on earth. Well, many people don't like to make changes in their lives to make life better for others. Not everyone followed the religious laws of the Bible. And many, many years ago, not every king or queen cared about what was best for other people. So when Jewish people talked about fixing the world, they were a threat to leaders of countries wherever they lived. Jews were punished and told to keep their beliefs to themselves. But they couldn't. In other religions, there are beliefs and rules about caring for other people, of course. But Judaism actually teaches to help make the changes right now so that people would stop suffering. So now imagine you're Moses. First, you figure out you're Jewish and not Egyptian, and then figure out that the wealth and power of Egypt is based on treating millions of Jews and other slave people as if their lives didn't matter. So God tells you to be the one to go to the mighty Pharaoh and demand that he let all of the slaves go. To just leave Egypt and force Egyptians to do all the hard work that the slaves used to do. It took a lot of convincing to get Pharaoh to finally agree to let all the slaves go, because he liked the power he held over them, and because losing all those workers would leave his country in ruin. Imagine today if suddenly millions of workers in every field suddenly left the United States and no one came to replace them. Jews were often among the people who spoke about and hoped that powerful leaders would learn to leave them alone, to stop blaming them for things they didn't do, and maybe, just maybe, even start to listen to them about making the world better for all people, not just the most powerful ones. Okay, now let's fast forward back up to the 1900s. Germany had suffered greatly as a result of World War I. Not only did they lose the war, but the country had many troubles after the Great War. The Nazis came to power by blaming the Jews for all of Germany's problems and by spreading the belief that all Jews must die. So the Nazis got more and more powerful because many Germans and other people in Europe began to really believe that the Nazi leader, Adolf Hitler, was right. Nazi Germany started forcing Jews into places called concentration camps. But these were no summer camps. Instead of having nice, normal life, Jews and others that the Nazis didn't like were separated from the members of their family. Many were killed immediately once they arrived in the camps, as described before. Many more died by working too hard and becoming extremely sick and not being given enough food or medicine to be healthy. One young man in a concentration camp wrote the words to the next song I sing. It's about how he saw a beautiful little yellow butterfly just before he entered the camp. That butterfly would be the last one he ever saw.
The very last, so richly, brightly sun's tears could sing against a white stone. For 7 weeks I've lived in here, penned up inside this ghetto. But I have found my people here. The dandelions call to me, and the white chestnut branches in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears could sing against a white stone. Tumbala, 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 laika. Tumbala, 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 laika. Tumbala, laika, spielbala, laika. Tumbala, laika, freilich soll sein. Tumbala, tumbala, tumbala.
This is another song associated with the Holocaust. In Yiddish, it tells of a young man playing riddles with a young woman he likes. After telling him how silly he is, the answers she gives are really very wise in how they describe the Jewish people during that ridiculously difficult period of time. They continued living without enough water. Their love for each other and for God would burn without end, and their hearts kept crying even when they ran out of tears. A simple little folk song that described a people experiencing the most horrible evil ever. Obviously, not all the Jews were killed in the Holocaust. While 6 million perished, many, many Jewish people survived the awful concentration camps. Others lived in countries not ruled over by the Nazis, and many had left Europe before Nazis really took hold. Many people suffered, and we mourn for the millions who died. On Yom HaSho'ah, and always, we pay special attention to the survivors of the concentration camps. These Holocaust survivors somehow managed to live through the worst imaginable circumstances. There have been other such terrible killings like the Holocaust in other parts of the world. But the World War II Holocaust, unfortunately, was the worst because of how many people were killed. This group of survivors are the people who actually lived and have been telling their personal stories about the Holocaust since they were liberated, since they were set free from the concentration camps in the spring of 1945. They are special. Their lives are especially meaningful because they represent how people can survive even the worst punishments. Each one is kind of like a miracle. Many spent their remaining lives trying to understand why they lived while others didn't. But, of course, there isn't an answer to that. Right after World War II ended, a new question was being asked by all the countries who worked together to defeat the Nazis. Okay, so now, where should the Jewish people go? Millions were forced to leave their homes and cities, and they couldn't go back now, at least not easily. Remember how many Europeans had believed that everyone should live in this country where they or their families had originally come from? Well, before World War II, before World War I even, the Jewish people had begun organizing a plan to get all Jews to move back to their homeland country, Israel. Not all Jews wanted to leave the United States, Canada, or other countries like Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, where Jews had lived for centuries. And many of the survivors wanted to get as far away from Europe and the Middle East as possible. They were still scared. But hundreds of thousands and eventually millions did want to go back to their ancient homeland of Israel. Jews had kind of always hoped to go back to Israel, but they weren't able to or weren't allowed to. Now was a different story. Israel had already begun developing into a country before the Holocaust. Now that the Holocaust was over, many Jews felt that the only place that they could ever feel safe, could ever feel like a whole person, was back in Israel. It wasn't easy, but Israel became a modern country again, with a president, a prime minister, a parliament, a post office, a Supreme Court, a military, as well as businesses, universities, and great, wonderful medical centers. In 1948, it's no wonder that the new Israeli national anthem was based on a poem called Hatikva, the Hope.
that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart.
Eli, Eli, my God, I pray that certain things will never end. The land, the sea, the waves, the thunder and lightning, and the human prayer that life will always go on. The Holocaust was absolutely horrible. And there are some people who try to get others to believe that it never actually happened. That it was all a hoax, a false story, a big fat lie developed by the Jewish people to get sympathy and convince the nations of the world to give them permission to reestablish their homeland. Isn't that ridiculous? Millions and millions of people on 6 continents had witnessed and had some part in what happened during World War II and the Holocaust. The Nazis themselves kept very detailed records of everyone who was killed, what property they had stolen from Jews and many other people. So, to remember all those who died or were murdered, to honor all those who survived, to acknowledge and thank all those who helped fight against the Nazis and tried to protect Jewish people from being hurt by hiding them in their homes or helping them escape from Europe, people referred to as the righteous Gentiles. Mostly, we pray for a world where peace will connect all people into making the world a better place for everyone to live. We observe Yom HaSho'ah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, to ask God, the ultimate maker of peace, to continue teaching us how to get along better with everyone else on the planet, to work together to figure out the cures to horrible diseases, to make sure that everyone on earth can at least live without fear of going hungry or thirsty, and to make sure that we put all of our brain power together and all the money needed to do good things for each other. Now, not later. While we or our children are still alive, we can share in getting the job done right. May God, who has created peace and order in the universe, help us to create peace and order here on earth. Then will all the people of the earth be blessed and live healthy, productive lives. And let us all say together, Amen.
Oseh Shalom b'mromav, Oseh Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, amen. Oseh Shalom b'mromav, Oseh Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Oseh Shalom.